All right, so I have decided, I've made the decision, that no, we will not be tested on the stuff we're going over right now. So your next test was going to be on chapters 6, 7, and 8. As you can see, 6 was on the standard server controls, 7 was more on validation, and 8 was what we're working on now. But instead, we'll make it on 6, 7, and 9. All right, and we'll have that test later on this week. Tomorrow, we will go through all of chapter 9, probably one of the harder chapters in the book, at least so far, and it's on master pages. And the reason that it's kind of hard is that the way that they're set up here, it's quirky, for lack of better words. But when you create a master page, you're creating a template off of which you can create other pages. All right, so that's what we'll be getting into tomorrow. So where we left off was on page 300, talking about how to use URL encoding. As it says here, URL encoding provides yet another way to maintain state by storing information in a page on the client. The information is stored in a query string. You may or may not be aware of this. Hopefully this is something we talked about a year ago, but just in case it's not. Again, looking at this, that if I go out, as I've shown you before, and I go out to Amazon.com, well, when I first get out there, where am I? I'm on literally Amazon.com. Makes sense. But if I come out here and I say, you know what, I want to find something that's in books. Okay, it doesn't look like much, but now I come in here and I'll say ASP.net, and I hit enter. Well, you'll notice how all of that stuff changed, or stuff got added to it, whatever way you want to look at it. All right, and I don't know how to read totally everything that's in their URL, but I will tell you that everything that from the question mark on over, that's the query string. All right. When you go and you call a file where you have the method set to get, that's what it's going to look like. Up in the query string, you're going to get information. I know we talked about this last semester, and I talked about this today with the first year people, because we're up to chapter 9 in the book that you had, the HTML book, so we did forms today. All right, and we were talking about query strings. I did something very similar to what I've just shown you right here. And I said, as you go through, this is again a set of key value pairs. All right. And that's how the whole thing is set up. I thought it was kind of funny because there's the first book that comes up. So they mention a little bit more about it here. It says here a hyperlink with a URL that includes a query string. So the category is FX, all right, and the product is some kind of a fog machine. Okay, that is not something you care about, but when you think about it, virtually everything that you work with is going to be database driven, and that's where all that stuff becomes important. All right. So it says here you can have, that's a hyperlink, but you can have an anchor element that includes a query string. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think this stuff is used as much in ASP.NET, but when I've taught PHP in the past, we get to a certain point that virtually everything we do is query strings. We're manipulating query strings. All right. What we'll get to in a later chapter is something like this. And that's called an SEO, or search engine optimization friendly URL. The idea is you only show the user what they need. The rest is, for lack of better words, kind of hidden from them. And search engines like this, they don't have to go and ferret through a lot of information on query strings. All right. If your site is set up like this, the chances are you're going to get a better ranking, all right, from Google. So again, they go through this in more depth and breadth of coverage. Hopefully in just a couple minutes when we go through these exercises, all right, it'll make a little bit more sense. The good news is, to my knowledge, these exercises for Chapter 8, both of them, we have to put in code, but I don't think we have to do anything with the interfaces. They're already built for us. So it's just the code that we'll concentrate on. All right. So this chapter ends, as the author says here, by showing you 2 pages of the shopping cart application with a couple of added features. Well, let's look at what they are. All right. The first thing is down at the bottom, you'll notice there's a timestamp on it, and there's a page counter, page hit, whatever you want to call it. So that's down here. And the second thing is, now what they're saying is that you can't just go to a shopping cart, you have to log in. And that pretty much is reminiscent of the way it is. If you're going to start buying things from someplace, they'll want you to set up an account, right? And that's what they're talking about doing right here. So, what's new? Well, not a whole lot. They've got some labels that they put in here, but let's look at, as it says, the critical C# code that they mentioned, because these are the last 2 pages of the chapter, to my knowledge. So it says Figure 814 presents the critical C# code. All right. So as we take a look in here, notice the first thing up at the top of the screen. We've got a different using statement. We haven't touched on that one thus far. Using system.web.caching. All right. Then it says bind the drop-down list and update the page hit count. Well, we've done this before, but we haven't done this before. Because what we're saying is, again, it says if it's not postback. So if it's not the first time, all right, that means we're returning to the site. Does that make sense? So if we're returning to the site and we're in page load, as far as the system is concerned, we're another user coming in. Again, it doesn't matter if it's you and you get out and get back in again, or if it's me and then it's Valerie and then it's Tiffany, etc. It doesn't matter. They're just doing a count. Okay. Now, what's new in here when you take a look at it, again, look at the comments. Get first name from cookie and set welcome message if it exists. So if you already know the person's first name, it's the idea of a little bit of personalization. Okay. Get the timestamp and display it. Or set the timestamp in cache to now plus 10 and then display it. I mean, is that, what would you call that, a little nicety to let the user see that? I have seen this already. I've gone out to websites where you know it's more an international site, and maybe they give you your time, so they'll look at the server and they'll say, oh, Central Daylight Time. All right, and they'll say it's 2:01 p.m. But if I'm in England or something like that, it'll show me the time there as well. All right. And in fact, I have worked on projects in the past where I have worked with people internationally. Sometimes they'll do that because you probably have a pretty good idea. If it's 2 o'clock where you are in the afternoon and it's 2 o'clock in the morning where they are, chances are they're probably not on the system. Type of an idea. All right. So the critical code, notice we're calling set cookie, and we're setting the first name, and we're setting the last name, and what are we doing in there? Okay. We're basically just setting up a cookie. We're creating a new HTTP cookie. Actually, 2 of them. One with the first name, one with the last name. And that's it. So like I said, I probably could have just finished before. I didn't realize until we got done that we were that close to the end. So let's take a look at these extra exercises and see what it is we have to do. They're both going to keep working with this Royal Inn and Suites. So in this exercise, you'll store the data that's entered into a request page so that it can be displayed like the confirmation code. To make it easier, you'll start from a project that contains the ASPX code for the confirmation page, the class that defines the session state for the state object, an enhanced event handler, and a new display reservation method for the request page. All right, so we've got all this. Notice what's new. All right, when we confirm it, okay, basically they're telling you to confirm the request, but it's grabbing all of your information once you've filled it in and you click request, it's grabbing all the information. Right there, right there. So you've got the chance before you click confirm request, you can modify it. So, oh, I'm not staying 2 days, I screwed up, or I wanted 2 queens or whatever. You can go back in and make changes to it. All right. Once you click the confirm request, again, you get the thank you for your request. We'll get back to you in 24 hours. Now, again, I asked you to do this, so if you haven't done so, and I'll do the same, I guess I probably have it open, but I want to make sure I've got the right one open. So the file that I asked you before to go in and copy over the folder. So I'm going to open Project Solution. I've got mine on the desktop. And there it is. So I should have right now the same one that you have. So if I come in here right now and I bring up my request page, all right, you can see, I think at least, it's all done already. All right, so I'm going to actually run this to see what it looks like. All right, so you can see it. Departure date, let's try it and see. I don't have any idea if this is even going to work or not. Looks like it sent it, but I didn't get anything back. Okay, and I think that's what we're going to be putting in right now. So, what they tell you. Open the file. Already done that. Open the reservation class in the models directory to see how it's defined. You may or may not be surprised at the brevity of it. So I'm going to go into models here, reservation CS. Because that's it. Basically what it's saying is it's creating what are called getters and setters. This is pretty automated in ASP.NET. When we get into Java next semester, you'll be creating your own getters and setters. Then when we go to Kotlin, Kotlin is a lot more like this, where much of the getting and setting is done for you automatically. All right, I've said this kind of thing to you before when we talked about databases. But if it's the first day of class, and I don't know any of you, Valerie happens to be the first person to walk in, and I say, hello, what's your name? And she says, Valerie. That's a getter. That's accessing information. All right. If I say, okay, if it's on the first day of class, and if I say, okay, I'm going to put you into 3 groups. All right. The first group is going to be the 3 gentlemen that are back there. That's a set. So a set is called a mutator because you're typically changing something. A get is called an accessor because you're not changing anything. And if you remember from database days, remember the first thing we learned were select statements, where you couldn't change the data but you could look at it? That's an accessor. You are selecting. Then we talked about inserts and updates and deletes. Those are setters. All right, so just kind of keep that in mind. Much of this stuff is automated for you in ASP.NET. So I think that's what the author wanted you to see, but I'm not even sure. All right. So the next thing we're told to do in step 3, review the code for the load event of the request form. So we got to go to request aspx.cs, and we're going to look at the load event in here. All right. So what are we doing? Okay. We're setting the year. If you may or may not remember, but in the lower right-hand corner was the copyright. So that should say copyright 2017 in here. Display any saved reservation data if there is any. So if it's not equal to null, you're calling display reservation. Otherwise, you're setting the arrival date, and we're setting, remember these things we did last time? Those are our 2 defaults. The date is today's date, and we're setting it to king by default. All right. Here's the display reservation information. So again, remember what that said. We created a reservation object. All right. And if there's information in there, we want to display it. All right. Want to display what? Well, the stuff that's shown right here. So this is assuming we have an arrival date, a departure date, a number of people staying, a reservation bed type, a special request. In other words, we're grabbing everything. In the past, what we did is, this was session, right? This would be like session, and then in brackets, we'd have double quote, and then the name of the field, etc., that kind of thing. Now we're actually putting it into an object. Clear? Very similar to what we saw before. Might even be identical to what we saw before. All right? And again, that reservation stuff, basically, it's doing it here. And what the author is getting to, just so you know this, is as we get closer and closer to chapter 12, we're transitioning toward putting all this stuff into databases so that we can take it out of databases. And that's the beginning of it right here by creating that class. All right? So the author says if the page isn't a postback and there is a reservation object, meaning it's already been created, it calls display reservation, and it moves the data from session state to the controls on the request page. Otherwise, as it says, it just sets the default values. Okay, so we've done steps, I believe, step 1, step 2, step 3, and step 4. All right. So the next thing we're told to do in step 5 here in the next section, we're told to code the click event handler for the submit button of the request form. Bless you. So right now, if we take a look at this, right now, and we come and we take a look at, at what we have here, all right, and I go back to the request ASPX page, I go into design mode. You know the drill here because we've done it enough times already. All right. So if I come down, come on, there we go, to the submit, nothing in there. Okay, so that's what we're asked to add. All right, so I'm going to explain this. It may or may not make sense to you. One thing to keep in mind is what we're starting to do right now is we're starting to work with more code and generating classes. Most of the time when I teach students any kind of programming language that involves classes, they're very apprehensive at best about it. And they're like, okay, I sort of even get this. Why the hell are we doing it? And I give you my argument, and you can come back and say, okay, I have only one question then. Why the hell are we doing it? All right, because what you do with classes, you can do without classes. But what classes are their blueprints. All right, so if I wanted to, like, I cannot, for example, make a prototypical student, You know, I could probably do that and get information about everybody and create a prototypical student. But when you create a class, it's a blueprint from which you create objects. All right. As an example, if I was to create if I was to create a class called person, all right, I might give them a height, a weight, an eye color, a hair color, a gender, etc. It's stuff that all people or all humans have. Okay? And I could also give them methods. Now, a human object could only do what I gave it the methods to do. All right? Because I used to do this kind of thing where I put on the board, okay, what can we do? Well, let's say we'll allow you to do 3 things: eat, drink, and sleep. Okay? And they'd say, well, then what about, for example, what about belch? No, if you don't give it that ability, it can't do it. So the thing to keep in mind is when you create a class, the class only has the ability to do the things you give it the ability to do. And you're like, well, yeah, but it could also, no, it can't. It's stupid software. And if you forget to put something in, it's not smart enough to know, oh, you should also have this. Now, you may have heard of things like machine learning, all right? And, that's becoming more and more prevalent today. And AI, which is, for lack of better words, kind of making a comeback. With a lot of that, what it does is machines are now listening to humans. And when this started, they were just mimicking back what humans were doing. But now it's more than that. They're trying to be able to be able to understand human thought patterns and things like that. We're not into that kind of stuff. So, if you remember from before, in earlier chapters, we did this. And I want you to start typing. We only want to do this, and what do we have? Maybe 30 lines, 20 lines, something like that. Okay. We only want to do this if the form has been validated. Does that make sense? All right. We put our validators and stuff in. We don't want to do it. If the user clicks submit and they haven't filled in any fields, we shouldn't be going and creating a reservation object. That doesn't make any sense. All right. So this is new. I don't know why I did that. Okay, that's the first thing we're doing. So I'm going to put a comment here. Instantiate a new reservation object. Instantiate just means create one. When this happens, when this code fires, okay? And I hope that what I say makes sense to you, and if it doesn't, that you'll ask. All right? Remember, this, for lack of better words, I am purposely going back to an earlier chapter. This right here. We did this in the last chapter. Okay? Hopefully you remember that stuff. When we have this line of code that fires, not that line, this line of code that fires right here. What happens is it goes into this class and it says, oh, we got all that stuff. Do the getters, because we're not setting anything. So what it does is it comes in and it grabs, for lack of better words, everything that's in every one of these fields. All right? And it puts it together collectively into this reservation object. All right? And you might say, well, geez, why didn't you give it they didn't have to call it reservation. Okay? But we don't know yet any of the information in here. We don't know that if it's my name there, we don't know to call it Jeff Scott. All right? And besides that, if you book at a place, they're going to give you some kind of a number anyway. That's the way they look at you. You're not looked at as a human being. You're just a number that's made it in a reservation. So we've come in, and that's the first thing we've done. All right? So we came in and we did this, and we created a new reservation object. Let me cut this down. All right. Now, to do that, we are going to have to basically come in here and do some jacking around, whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to say here, reservation dot, and I didn't spell it right. Notice as soon as I say reservation, I want to do it again because it's important enough. As soon as I say reservation, first of all, the IntelliSense picked it up, right? So I can just double click or I can tab or whatever. Now when I say dot, notice what it has. Arrival date, bed type, departure date. It's got all that stuff. It's got a bunch of other stuff like get hash code, get type. We're not going to worry about that stuff for right now. All right? But we're going to say here arrival date equals convert dot to date time txt arrival date dot text. This isn't going to fit, so give me a second. I'll move this onto 2 lines. All right. Remember that everything that we're working with in here, it's just grabbing a whole bunch of information. It needs to know that that's a date time field. By default, the stuff that's in this class, I don't even know what the type is or if it has a type. At best, it would be probably a string. Okay? So that's the first thing we want to do. Well, if we want to do an arrival date, what other date do we want to do? Departure date. Makes sense, right? And since I'm kind of feeling in a lazy mood, I'm going to put for my second one here. Oops, I don't know what happened there. All right, that's great. Oh, I just lost what I typed in, but that's fine. So there's the first one. I don't know why, but when I tried to copy it, it didn't like it. So I'm going to type in reservation again, dot departure date. And that's equal again a convert dot to date time. And that's going to be txt departure date dot text. So we've now accounted for 2 of our fields in there. All right. The system also needs to know, so we've got 2 date values, but we need to do some date math. Why do we need to do some date math? That's part of it, but the other thing too is, let's just assume that they were valid. We need to know how many days you're staying. All right. Because with a lot of the, and you know this, a lot of times when you book rooms today, they ask for everything in advance. How long are you staying? Okay. And you say 4 days. Okay, well, that's going to be this cost. You have credit card. Boom.
So you just subtract the departure by arrival.
That's what we're going to do. But we're going to have to give that, all right, we're going to have to give that a variable too. All right, and we're actually going to make it as a variable of type time span. And we'll call it, I don't know, TS days, time span days, equal. Now we can do what you just said. All right, and that is, we can say reservation dot departure date minus reservation dot arrival date. Why doesn't it like that?
Can't you just put the departure date?
What's that? Oh, that's right.
Maybe equals instead of minus.
That would do it. Thank you. I had somebody today when we were creating the form, and we had everything. The form was done, and we were starting to do some CSS on it. I couldn't figure out why my CSS didn't work. And one guy in the front, you could tell he didn't want to embarrass me. He goes, "There's only one L in label." It was exact, and he was right. I put LABELL, and I kept looking at it, and I didn't even notice it was wrong. All right. Now we can say days equals all right. Technically, we're working with date time fields, and that's why we have to use time span there. All right, now if this helps, all right. All right, I'll leave that up there and let everybody catch up. So again, the reason for doing this is the values that are in both of those are date time fields. Remember how we set that up as date time pickers? If we had left them, instead of being those, if we had left them as text boxes, we wouldn't have to do this. All right, so that would have made for less code, but it would have been possible. What if the person puts hello in there for the arrival date or the departure date? They could do that if they were text boxes, and the program would blow up. So we're trying to do a little bit, we have to write a little bit more code, but we're doing it to try to make it harder for the user to screw up. All right. Purdy. Oops. Now the number of people is just a number, and it's an integer. And none of you have asked me this, all right? None of you have asked me this, but I have been asked this in the past when I have taught this class. Why can't you just put in there convert dot to int? The smart-ass answer is there isn't one, all right? So how do you know whether to use int32 or int64? The answer is, unless you're doing something astronomically big, like maybe for the federal budget or something like that, you virtually always use int32. All right, that's the short answer. So when we look at this, all right, and we go back to this, not that. We have now handled the arrival date. We've handled the departure date. We've handled the number of people. Doesn't seem like much, but it's a start. All right. Now, what do we have to check? Well, we have to see which one of these they chose, correct? Everybody looking here? We have to see, did they choose king? Did they choose 2 queens, or did they choose 1 queen? Remember, that is one of the things that we decided at the beginning we were going to set a default value to. It defaults to king, if you remember when we start. All right? So, how about this? Just get the bed type. Does anybody remember? I'm going to put a dot here. What are we going to look for then? Dot what? Checked. Dot checked. Very good. So if it's checked, well, we know that they chose a king row. Now, we're hard coding in there. We probably could go in, I didn't even think about this, but we probably could go in and grab this, or grab this, or grab this. Actually grab that text. See what I'm talking about? That might actually be harder than you think it is, though. So we're just going to hard code those values in here. Now, technically, now that I look at it, because this is the way I wrote it, well, one of them has to be checked. Would you agree with that? One must be checked, so we don't really even need that. You could write it like that. That's probably a cleaner way to write it. I wrote mine as an else if in there, but that probably is cleaner. Remember, one thing about radio buttons is since we gave it those 3 radio buttons, one of them was initialized. Now we know one is going to always have to be set. You can't help it. All right, so now, as we come in here, now we've got the arrival date, the departure date, the number of people, and the bed type. We're just working our way down. So the next thing is special requests. Okay? Would you agree that if there's nothing in there, they probably don't have a special request? That'd be my thought on it. So, next comment here, get special requests, if any. All right, and I'm going to assume, and you can do it either way, but I'm going to assume that I'm going to check first for nothing. And if there aren't any, I'm just going to put none. Remember what we're doing here. We're trying to generate something that the user, they're going to get like a preliminary type of bill, and we're showing them that they don't have any special requests. They can always go back in and edit this if they want to when they're done, because if they decided, oh, I need extra pillow, I need extra sheets, whatever it, extra towels, whatever it happens to be. All right. Otherwise, we know there is a special request rather. So we're just going to set that to txt special request.text. Does it make sense to you what we're doing? That's the most important thing. We're looking at your entire reservation. Every field, we're putting them together into a collection that's called reservation. And now we're filling up that collection. All right? When we get the collection all filled up, we're going to take that reservation and we're going to stick it into a session variable. Then we'll redirect it to the confirm page. Does all that make sense? All right, so again, looking at this, I'm purposely being very deliberate. We've done this and this and this and this and this. The good news is when we look at what's left, the majority, if not everything else that's left, all right, text box, text box, text box, text box, right? And you can say, well, yeah, but it doesn't matter. It's already been validated. So those next 4 fields have already been done. Not only that, since this is a drop down and we didn't even default it, there's only 2 values in there, if you remember, email and phone. So it's already either set to email or it's set to phone, right? So all we have to do is basically copy that stuff in. All right, so that's what we're going to do. Copy in remaining values from request page. The order in which you do this doesn't matter, but I'm just going to do it in the order that we had them. So the first name is equal to txt first name dot text. All right, so these 4 lines right here, those 4 lines are grabbing those 4 values right there. So the only thing that's left is our preferred method. And that's our drop-down list. Dot selected value. That is selected value there, because that is going to be either email or it's going to be phone. Again, I wish there was some magical analogy or something I could give you, but for lack of better words, we're building a reservation. And so what we're doing is we're going out here and we're grabbing everything that was in here and we're copying it to a reservation object so we can create, so we can use it as though it's one unit. That's what a class is. All right. So let's see what else. Is there anything else? Yeah. Oh yeah. Set the session variable. That's everything for the whole exercise. Again, you're all bright enough that you can copy this in without any kind of problems. But my question is what's happening here make sense to you? Because you have to understand this concept of classes. Virtually everything we do next semester in Java. In Java, if you just want to write hello on the page, that's all. That's all you want to do. You have to create a class to do it. It is totally object-oriented. All right? Kotlin is also. Kotlin looks less object-oriented, but it still is. Good time to save if you haven't saved lately. Give me a second. A couple of you might still be typing it in. Let me take a look at it, hopefully in action. So, start a click event handler. It should initialize a new reservation object. Everybody see this? That's step 5. New click event object for the submit button. Create a new reservation object. So that was step 5. Then write a statement that saves the reservation object in session state and finish with a redirect. Well, that's down at the bottom. We don't want to do it until we fill the session variable up with information. The author says, and I use this, all right, if you have trouble, there's the convert to date time. To get the number of dates, they even say to use this time span property in here. And use the convert to int 32. So that's all given in step 6. I like that. If you still have trouble, you can skip the conversions that you can't figure out. Well, you can, but yet that would be probably problematic if you were creating this for a hotel. It's got things you don't understand, just don't do them. No, I don't think that's going to work. Yes?
Would it be better to put all this into like its own method, or?
We could do that. The question was, could we put all this stuff into its own method? And yeah, you could. Yeah, sure.
Better to do it that
Yeah.
way, so that it would work
Yeah.
on every single time?
Possibly, yeah.
I was just curious.
Step 7 says, finish the confirmation form. Review the load event handler for the confirmation form. Well, we don't even have the confirmation form up. All right, well, there's that. So we need the load event handler. So that's in here. Well, looks to me like that's not totally filled. All right, it says this handler sets the year, which is what it's doing right there. And it displays, so it calls display reservation. Okay, which of course I believe I probably didn't even remember to take a copy of, but let's see if I did or not. Reservation confirmed. Yep, there it is. And whether you realize it or not, you know what we're doing in here. Now we're going to be taking those session variables, for lack of better words, all right, and we're going to be copying them back over to the labels, because we're in the other form now. We're in the confirmation form, all right? So in here, we probably got, I don't know, maybe 10 lines of code, something like that. And please look up on the screen here. If you look, just realize, I'm going to go back to design mode, sorry. So we're in here. We have 2 buttons, right? We've got confirm and we've got modify. Okay? And I don't even know if I put the code in for the modify because we weren't asked to. Probably would have been a good idea. But we want to put in display reservation now. First thing that we want to do, this is different from what we've done in the past. This is going to look a little weird, but just bear with me till I get the whole thing typed in. You remember previously in the other page, we did this. We created a new reservation object, correct? So we need one of those every time somebody makes a reservation. We don't need to do that now. We've got the reservation. We want to confirm the reservation that they've already made. So what we want to do in here is we want to take this and we want to say, bless you, it equals, and we have to cast this into type reservation, and it's session reservation.
Can you see an equal sign?
What's that? Yes, thank you. I don't know if it's me or if that key is kind of sticking. I have no idea. All right. So what this is saying is previously in our request page, we created a reservation object. Now we're grabbing everything that's in that reservation object and we're going to copy it all back to our particular labels. Now, we can do this any way we want. I use the short date string. You'll see it when we get there. But you can format this to a lot of different ways. In other words, do you want today to say 9-18-2017, or you want it to say September, the word September, space, 18, comma, space, 2017? That's all up to you. You can just, that's no big thing. You could format the date in different ways. But I'm going to format it to a short date string. All right, I'm going to try doing a copy again and see if I get it to work. There's 2. We've got a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, because there's 11 pieces of information. So again, in other words, if I come back here and count, I should get 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I don't remember what the other one is, but there's at least 10 there. All right. Oh, I know what it is. The other one is the one we calculated, the number of days you're staying. All right. And remember, that value was an integer, so we're converting it over to a string. Does that make sense? Because we're displaying it on the form. Same thing with the number of people. Bed type's already been converted. And I think the rest of them are they're all strings already anyway. That should be everything. So again, and I know some of you may think I'm a little anal, but this is the reason I like doing this. To me, that's much easier to read. You may not agree with that, but I can see everything that's there. It's not kind of all jumbled all over the screen. So I am going to put a comment here. You don't have to do this, but that's okay. Say create a reservation object based on the session variable. All right. Again, I've never had anybody complain to me, you put way too many comments into that program. I'm going to ask again, and I'm going to keep asking this. Based on the comments and the code that you see, is what we're doing, does it make sense to you? Because we're going to be just doing more and more of this. Eventually, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be writing things to a database or grabbing things from a database. We're going to be taking the information that's in a database and we're going to be filling our form with that. Does that make sense? So if somebody wants a copy of their reservation they've already made, it'll be in a database. In other words, we want to work with persistent data. When we work with persistent data, we have to do it one of two ways. Either we have to use a file, just a regular file, all right, which typically doesn't have a lot of semblance of order to it, or, as we're going to do, we use a database. Now, there is one more thing. It's literally like a line of code. But when I come back here and I look at my confirm.aspx file, okay, there is that confirm. And when you click confirm, I'm going to say LBL message dot text. Remember this? We did this before. Thank you for your request. Break tag in there. And we will get back to you in 24 hours. And I believe, at least, that is everything. All right, I've saved again. I think at least I'm going to go back to my request page, and I'm going to give it a try. So, arrival date, departure date, let's just put 9/20, 2017, number of people, we're going to change all these, just two queens, vegan, how about extra towels? And we'll change this just so it's something different. Telephone, submit, and there's our stuff. And I purposely changed just about everything. Notice it's got number of days. It's been calculated. and I do have a special request. If I decide I can modify that request, looks like we don't have any code in there to do that, so we have to write that back. And what we'd have to do then to modify the request is we'd have to bring the form up and let them make changes to it, and then they have, you know. All right. And what we're doing, whether you realize it or not, it's pretty heavy stuff. Okay? And to me, it makes sense to be working with this kind of stuff with a reservation thing like this. I didn't know if it really made sense with our loan. I was thinking about this over the weekend, and it's like, I guess you could make an appointment for your loan calculation, but that's not really what that program was about. All right. I think this is a good place, good time to take another break. It's 2:54. Let's come back at about 5 after 3, please.